My 26th birthday, my dad didn't give me a cake, a hug, or even a simple happy birthday. Instead, he handed me a letter, my termination notice. After years of building his company into a $97 million empire, he fired me like I was nothing. But what he didn't know was that I had already planted the seeds of a revenge so devastating, he'd beg me for mercy. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or tossed aside after giving your everything, this story will hit home. Smash that like button, subscribe for more stories, and let's dive into how I turned the ultimate betrayal into the sweetest revenge of my life. My name is Amelia, and on my 26th birthday, my dad didn't give me a cake, a hug, or even a simple happy birthday. Instead, he handed me a letter, my termination notice. After years of building his company into a $97 million empire, he fired me like I was nothing. But what he didn't know was that I had already planted the seeds of a revenge so devastating, he'd beg me for mercy. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or tossed aside after giving your everything, this story will hit home. Smash that like button, subscribe for more stories, and let's dive into how I turned the ultimate betrayal into the sweetest revenge of my life. I grew up in the shadow of my father's empire. He was a businessman to the bone, tough, ruthless, respected in the industry, but feared in the household. My mom left when I was 10, leaving me to be raised by the man who believed love could be replaced with lessons on power and money. While other kids had tea parties or cheer practice, I sat across mahogany conference tables, swinging my legs under the weight of numbers, graphs, and balance sheets. My father's idea of bonding was quizzing me on profit margins and drilling me about which employees were dead weight. By the time I turned 18, I wasn't just his daughter, I was his apprentice. And to my surprise, I was good. Really good. I had this natural eye for strategy, for seeing angles my dad's old-school instincts missed. I pushed him toward digital marketing when he still thought billboards were the future. I streamlined logistics, cut down waste, and convinced him to invest in tech automation before it was trendy. And the results? Explosive. When I first officially joined the company, it was worth about $15 million. Within 5 years, with my fingerprints on every project, we scaled to nearly $97 million. That empire wasn't his alone. It was ours. Or so I thought. But here's the thing about power. Some men can't share it. Not even with their own daughters. I should have noticed the signs earlier. The way he introduced me at board meetings. Never as the strategist behind our biggest deals, but as my daughter learning the ropes. The way he smiled and nodded when I pitched ideas, only to repeat them later as if they were his. The way employees whispered that maybe I'd inherit the company one day, and the way his jaw tightened every time he overheard. Still, I swallowed it. Because he was my dad. Because loyalty was supposed to mean something. Until the night of my 26th birthday. I came into the office expecting the family dinner that always ended up being at some overpriced steakhouse with investors tagging along. I wore a new dress, bought cupcakes for the staff, even set aside time in the evening to celebrate with friends. But instead of balloons or a smile, I found a plain envelope sitting on my desk. Termination notice. Effective immediately. The words blurred through the tears I refused to let fall. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear the sound of my father's footsteps behind me. "You've done well," he said flatly. "But it's time you stop playing CEO. You're young, you'll find something else. This company needs my direction, not your experiments." My throat went dry. "Dad, are you serious? I built this with you. I gave up everything for this." He didn't even flinch. Didn't even wish me happy birthday. Just turned and walked away. And in that moment, something in me broke. It wasn't just the betrayal of a father. It wasn't just the insult of being fired on my birthday. It was the cold realization. He never saw me as his equal. I was just his shadow. Disposable. But shadows have a way of slipping under doors, don't they? That night, as I stared at the termination letter, humiliation burning like acid in my chest, I made a vow. If he thought I was disposable, then I'd prove I was unstoppable. And I wouldn't just take back what was mine. I'd take everything he thought he could keep. I left the building that night with the envelope crumpled in my fist. The city lights blurred behind my tears as I walked aimlessly, my heels clicking against wet pavement. Every step felt like a betrayal echoing in my chest. I had given up friends, relationships, even the idea of a normal 20-something life just to prove myself worthy of him. And in the end, I was discarded like a used napkin. But humiliation has a strange way of morphing into fire. As I sat on a bench outside my office just hours ago, I started to breathe differently. My father thought he had ended me. He thought firing me was the last word. But I was only just beginning. The next few weeks were brutal. Employees who used to greet me warmly now avoided my eyes. I heard rumors whispered that I was too emotional, that my crazy modern ideas were destabilizing the company, that my dad had to step in to clean my mess. The lies burned worse than the truth. And then came the cherry on top, the press release. CEO Daniel Marks reaffirms his commitment to traditional business practices after letting go of his daughter, who was pursuing misguided strategies that put the company at risk. I stared at the article, my hands shaking. Misguided strategies? I was the one who had secured the automation deal that saved us millions. I was the one who pushed us into international markets. I was the one who had negotiated partnerships that doubled our client base. And yet, there it was, in black and white. My father rewriting history. But while he was busy erasing me, I was busy preparing. You see, I had always known my father's weakness. He was brilliant at building, but terrible at keeping. He trusted too few people, alienated his partners, and cut corners whenever he thought no one was looking. I had files, records, proof of the deals he manipulated, the corners he slashed, the lies he told investors. I had kept them because a part of me had always known this day would come. And I also had something he didn't: loyalty. Because while my father dismissed the employees as pawns, I treated them as people. I listened. I helped. I cared. And when word spread that I had been fired, more than a few reached out, not to gossip, but to check on me. One of them was Mark, a senior analyst who had been with the company for 12 years. He called me late one night, his voice hushed. "Amelia, it's not right what he did to you. Everyone knows the truth. And if you ever want to start something new, you won't be alone." His words hit me like lightning. Start something new. For the first time since that cursed birthday, I smiled. Still, I had to be smart. My father wasn't just ruthless. He was paranoid. He'd crushed competitors before, suing them into oblivion or poaching their clients with dirty tactics. If I wanted to rise, I had to be untouchable. So I laid low. I played the grieving daughter, pretending to lick my wounds while secretly planning my resurrection. Step 1: Connections. I reached out to the partners I had personally secured, quietly meeting with them in coffee shops, restaurants, even one in the back of a bookstore. I didn't badmouth my father. I didn't need to. They all knew the truth. They had worked with me, not him. Step 2: Team. Mark introduced me to others: analysts, designers, marketing experts, people who had grown tired of my father's iron grip. They didn't just want to work for money. They wanted to work for someone who believed in them. Step 3: Leverage. The files I had collected? They weren't just insurance. They were ammunition. Deals my father had falsified. Tax loopholes he exploited. A shady overseas contract that, if exposed, could bury him. I didn't want to destroy him yet. Not until I was ready. But when the time came, I'd have the match ready for the gasoline. Meanwhile, my father strutted around like a king. At industry galas, he laughed loudly, telling everyone how firing me was necessary tough love. At board meetings, he bragged about how he alone was steering the ship. He even gave interviews saying young people don't understand the real world, casting me as the spoiled daughter who couldn't handle pressure. Every lie he told only fueled me further. I remember one night in particular. I was scrolling through my phone when a video popped up, my father, in a tuxedo, holding a glass of champagne at some event. The reporter asked, "Do you regret letting your daughter go?" He smirked. That arrogant, dismissive smirk I knew too well. Regret? No. She had potential, but potential without discipline is just wasted energy. She'll thank me one day. I nearly threw my phone across the room. Thank him? For humiliating me? For erasing me? No. He would thank me. On his knees. when the empire he thought he owned was nothing but ashes, and I was the one holding the torch. So I worked, day and night. I rented a small, dingy office above a laundromat. The paint was peeling, the heater barely worked, and the fluorescent lights buzzed like angry bees. But to me, it was paradise. Because it was mine. Every morning I showed up with coffee-stained notebooks filled with strategies. Every night I left with my brain buzzing from back-to-back meetings with investors, ex-clients, and friends who believed in me. Slowly, painfully, beautifully, something began to form. A rival company. One built not on fear, but on innovation. Not on arrogance, but on trust. My company. And I gave it a name that carried weight. Phoenix Rising. Because just like the mythical bird, I was going to rise from the ashes my father thought he left me in. And when I did, it would be brighter and hotter than he could ever imagine. The first victory came sooner than I expected. One of our biggest former clients, an international logistics firm, called me directly. Amelia, the CEO said, his voice almost relieved. We've been miserable under your father's new terms. If you're serious about building something, we'll move with you. My hands trembled as I hung up the phone. That single contract was worth millions. It was enough to give Phoenix Rising credibility overnight. And just like that, the tide began to turn. But success is never quiet. When my father heard through the grapevine that I had started a rival company, he went ballistic. He stormed into one of our mutual partner meetings, red-faced, shouting about loyalty and betrayal. I wasn't there, but word spread fast. Apparently, he slammed his fist on the table and declared, "She's nothing without me. Just a little girl playing CEO." When I heard that, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I laughed. Because I knew something he didn't. I wasn't playing CEO. I was becoming one. And soon enough, the empire he thought was untouchable would crumble under the weight of his own arrogance. The first months of Phoenix Rising were chaos wrapped in hope. My office above the laundromat became a hive of energy, coffee cups stacked on desks, whiteboards crammed with ideas, laptops open late into the night. It wasn't glamorous. Some nights, the heater broke and we worked in coats and gloves. Other times, the Wi-Fi crashed mid-pitch, and I had to tether my phone just to keep the meeting alive. But the hunger in the room, the belief that we were building something new, something real, kept us warm. And when the first big contract came through, that was the spark. Word spread like wildfire. Amelia Marx is back. Meanwhile, my father's empire began to show cracks. The first sign was subtle. A delayed shipment here, a client complaint there. My father brushed it off, too proud to admit anything was wrong. He doubled down on his old-school methods, raising fees, tightening contracts, treating clients like they had nowhere else to go. But they did. They had me. One by one, I watched clients slip through his fingers and into my hands. Some came quietly, ashamed to admit they'd tolerated him for so long. Others came boldly, sending my father emails that CC'd me. "We're moving our account to Phoenix Rising. Amelia understands our needs." I could almost picture his face every time my name showed up in his inbox. That vein on his temple throbbing, his jaw clenching as he realized his shadow had turned into his competition. But success is never a straight line. For every contract I won, there were 3 I lost. Some clients were too afraid of my father's wrath. Others didn't believe in a young woman running her own show. "We'd love to, Amelia," they'd say, "but your father's name still carries more weight." That sting, it cut deep. Even when I built something from nothing, people still compared me to him. But instead of breaking me, it hardened me. Every rejection became fuel. Every door slammed in my face made me push harder. I poured my soul into Phoenix Rising, branding it as modern, innovative, humane. My father's empire was all about control. Mine was about trust. And slowly, people noticed. The true turning point came 6 months later. One of my father's biggest investors, a grizzled old venture capitalist named Howard, requested a meeting with me. This was the same man who once told me to leave the numbers to the men. I walked into that meeting prepared for dismissal. Instead, I found Howard sitting there with a folder of reports. "Your father's been bleeding money," he said, his tone cold. "But you're growing. Fast." I kept my face neutral, But inside, my heart raced. "We're doing our best." He leaned forward. "I want in." Those 3 words changed everything. With Howard's backing, Phoenix Rising wasn't just a scrappy startup anymore. It became a legitimate contender. Investors followed him like sheep, and suddenly, I had the capital to expand, hire more staff, and open a sleek downtown office. The laundromat days were over. When my father found out, he didn't stay quiet. I'll never forget the phone call. My cell buzzed late one evening, and when I answered, his voice was pure venom. "Amelia, what the hell do you think you're doing?" I almost laughed. "Building a company. Something you taught me." "This is betrayal," he roared. "You think you can take my clients, my people, and they're not yours." I cut in. My voice surprised even me. Steady, sharp, unafraid. "They chose me because I treat them with respect. Something you never learned." For a moment, silence. Then that low, dangerous growl I knew so well. "You'll regret this." But the thing is, I already had regretted enough. I regretted wasting years craving his approval. I regretted thinking loyalty would protect me. Now, I had nothing left to lose. That was when I stopped playing defense. I dug out the files I'd kept, the shady contracts, the tax manipulations, the falsified numbers he thought no one noticed. I didn't release them yet. Not yet. But I let whispers slip into the right ears. I let just enough truth out to make investors nervous. And it worked. Within months, my father's empire started shaking. His stock dipped. His board questioned him. Clients stopped returning his calls. At the same time, Phoenix Rising soared. We landed partnerships in 3 new countries. We launched a software platform that streamlined logistics in ways his outdated systems couldn't match. Our name wasn't just known, it was respected. I had become what he never wanted me to be, a leader in my own right. But here's the irony. Success didn't feel like triumph at first. I remember standing in my shiny new office one night, the city skyline glittering beyond the glass. My team was celebrating a new deal, champagne glasses clinking, laughter spilling down the hall. And yet, a part of me still ached. Because no matter how far I rose, I still wished, deep down, that my father could look at me and say, "I'm proud." But that man didn't exist. He never had. And it took losing everything to finally understand it. So I stopped chasing his validation. And I started chasing justice. The real battle was about to begin. My father, desperate to claw back his power, began waging war. He slashed his prices, tried to undercut my deals, even threatened lawsuits. At one point, he held a press conference, sneering into the cameras. "My daughter's little project is nothing but smoke and mirrors." The next day, I signed 3 new contracts. Clients weren't fooled. They had seen the difference. And every time he tried to bury me, I grew stronger. Still, I knew the endgame wasn't just competition. It was destruction. I didn't want to just beat him in the market. I wanted to take away the one thing he valued more than money, his reputation. And I had just the weapons to do it. The files. The proof. The skeletons rattling in his closet. All I had to do was strike at the right moment. And that moment was closer than I thought. Because as Phoenix Rising climbed to $50 million in value within its first year, my father's empire dropped from $97 million to barely $60. Investors fled. Clients defected. The press started whispering about the fall of Daniel Marks. He was desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. And one mistake in particular gave me the opening I had been waiting for. My father's empire was crumbling, but he refused to see it. In his mind, he was still the king, untouchable, untamed, unwilling to admit the truth. But desperation has a way of exposing weakness. One rainy afternoon, my phone buzzed with an email from an old contact, a mid-level manager still working at my father's company. Attached were copies of internal memos. Memos that revealed something explosive. My father had signed off on a new international deal, cutting safety corners so severe it was practically criminal. If that deal went public, not only could it tank his company, it could destroy him personally. I stared at the documents, my pulse racing. This was it. The opening I had been waiting for. But I didn't rush. Revenge isn't just about striking. It's about timing. And I wanted to make sure when I pulled the trigger, it would echo so loudly he'd never recover. First, I built the stage. I called Howard, the grizzled investor who had backed Phoenix Rising, and laid out what I had. His sharp old eyes widened as he scanned the documents. "Damn," he muttered. "If this is real, your father's done." "It's real," I said firmly. He leaned back, a sly grin spreading across his face. "Then let's not bury him quietly. Let's bury him in the spotlight." And so the plan began. We scheduled Phoenix Rising's first major press conference. A grand event in a downtown hotel ballroom. Sleek banners, glowing spotlights, cameras ready. The press thought it was to announce our expansion into Asia. And while that was true, it wasn't the real headline. The real headline would be my father's downfall. But I didn't stop there. I carefully leaked whispers to a few journalists I trusted. Hints about corruption. A trail pointing straight to my father. Enough to bait him into showing up to the press event himself. Because I wanted him there. I wanted him to hear it with his own ears when I pulled the rug out from under him. The night of the press conference, the air buzzed with energy. My team was electric, dressed sharp, their eyes gleaming with pride. I stood backstage in a black suit, my hair pinned up, palms sweating despite my calm facade. And then I saw him. My father, striding into the ballroom like a general marching into enemy territory. He wore his signature gray suit, his smile sharp and confident. But I could see the cracks, the slight slump in his shoulders, the nervous flick of his eyes as reporters swarmed him. Good. Let him feel it. When it was my turn, I walked onto the stage to a burst of applause. Cameras flashed. Microphones stretched toward me. "Thank you for being here," I began, my voice steady, echoing through the packed room. "Tonight, Phoenix Rising is proud to announce our expansion into Asia, a $20 million investment that will bring innovation and trust to clients across the globe." Applause again. But I held up a hand. "And yet," I continued, my tone darkening, "it would be irresponsible to talk about growth without addressing the dangers of corruption in this industry. Dangers that are closer than you think." The room shifted. Reporters leaned forward. My father, seated in the front row, stiffened. I clicked the remote, and the projector screen behind me lit up with documents, the very memos my father had signed. Contracts riddled with fraud, safety violations, and deliberate lies to investors. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cameras snapped furiously. "These documents," I said clearly, "come from Marks International, my father's company. The same company that once thrived on trust and innovation has now been reduced to cutting corners, endangering workers, and falsifying records to stay afloat." My father shot up from his chair, his face crimson. "Lies," he bellowed, his voice cracking. "She's fabricating this. She's bitter, jealous." But the reporters were already shouting questions. Microphones shoved toward him. Flashes exploding in his face. And I just stood there, calm, collected, the queen finally toppling the king. "Everything I've shown tonight is verifiable," I said, raising my voice above the chaos. "And Phoenix Rising will always stand for integrity, something Marks International has clearly abandoned." It was pandemonium. My father tried to storm the stage, but security held him back. His voice cracked as he shouted over the crowd. "Amelia, how dare you? You're my daughter." And I'll never forget what I said back. "Exactly. And that's why I learned from the best, including how to beat you at your own game." The room erupted. Reporters swarmed me with praise, with questions, with flashing lights. My father pushed through the crowd, red-faced, veins bulging, but no one listened. For the first time in his life, he was powerless. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within a week, federal investigators were circling. His investors fled en masse, dumping stock that sent the company value plummeting. Clients canceled contracts overnight. Headlines splashed across every paper. Industry titan falls, exposed by his own daughter. Phoenix Rising soars as Marks International collapses. And me? I became the face of triumph. The phoenix that rose from betrayal. But the sweetest moment came quietly, 2 weeks later. I was in my office. Our new office, a gleaming skyscraper with floor-to-ceiling windows, when the receptionist buzzed me. There's someone here to see you. I looked up, and there he was. My father. But he wasn't the king anymore. He looked smaller somehow, his suit rumpled, his hair gray and thin. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, were dulled with defeat. Amelia, he rasped, stepping into my office. You've ruined me. I folded my hands on the desk, tilting my head. No, Dad. You ruined yourself. I just showed the world the truth. His lips trembled. I'm your father. Don't you feel anything? For a moment, I searched myself. Did I feel pity? Regret? Love? No. What I felt was freedom. You taught me loyalty means nothing without respect, I said quietly. And I finally learned my lesson. He stood there, speechless, before finally lowering his head and walking out. And just like that, the empire he built was gone. The silence after he left my office was deafening. For years, I had dreamed of hearing him say the words, I'm proud of you. But standing there, watching him shrink into the elevator like a shadow fading into nothing, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I didn't need his validation. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need him. Because I had something far better, my own empire. The weeks that followed were surreal. Phoenix Rising became a sensation in the business world. Articles praised our growth, our integrity, our modern strategies. Clients lined up faster than we could onboard them. Everywhere I went, people whispered, that's Amelia, the woman who beat her father at his own game. And though the recognition felt good, the real victory was something quieter. The look on my team's faces when we signed deal after deal, the pride in their eyes when they said, we're building something special. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about freedom. As for my father, the downfall was swift. Investigations opened. Lawsuits piled up. The empire he had spent decades building evaporated in less than a year. The man who once stood on magazine covers, who strutted through galas as if he owned the world, was reduced to nothing more than a cautionary tale. And me? I didn't celebrate his ruin. I didn't need to. His arrogance had written his own ending. All I did was turn the lights on so everyone could see it. One night, as I stood by the window of my skyscraper office, the city lights twinkling below, I whispered to myself, Happy birthday, Amelia. Because this time, I had given myself the only gift that mattered. Freedom, power, and the sweet taste of justice. This story isn't just about money or power. It's about learning that respect can't be forced. It must be earned. Betrayal hurts, especially when it comes from family, but sometimes it's the very fire that forges you into who you were always meant to be. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and subscribe for more powerful tales of justice and revenge. And tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever seen? Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.